what a great session. I can see why it's the most popular session at the FSC Conference, Russ. And I'm sure you agree too that talking about money is so important because, as we're about to see, there are some pretty worrying trends in financial resilience and wellbeing in Aotearoa. And here to launch the FSC's latest research report, Financial Resilience Trends in New Zealand, we have two very special guests with us.
You all know and love our CEO, Richard Klipin, and joining him for this session is our colleague, David Bishop. Not only is David a marketing and communications consultant who writes all of the FSC's research reports, as I mentioned earlier, he also happens to be a master of wine science, and he selected the wines that many of us would have had last night at the gala dinner. So any wine connoisseurs in the room, definitely go and hit him up after the session, and Donna and I will give you the details of the after party that he's hosting for us later tonight.
I'll definitely be there, David, don't worry. So Richard and David, come on up, and we'd love to hear more about the latest insights.
Thank you, ladies. Awesome panel, really provocative, so thank you to you folks. Financial Resilience Index, at the start of the pandemic, in fact in March of 2020, February 2020, we had gone out to market and surveyed over 2,000 New Zealanders on a range of factors. We had a prepared time frame on all sorts of things we wanted to find out, and within about a month of that, we all went into lockdown and COVID became the thing that we've now lived through. And what we identified is that we almost had kind of ground zero data on things like how do New Zealanders feel about money, how do they feel about their job outlooks, how do they feel about well-being and money, how do they feel about housing and so on. So with that ground zero data, we said, I wonder what would happen if we started to track this through over the pandemic. And so that's pretty much what we did. Over the 2020, 21 and now 22, we've actually asked the same questions to over 2,000 New Zealanders to kind of track where they are. And the conversation that we're going to have just in a few short minutes is, what are some of the fault lines, what are some of the themes, what are some of the trends? And, you know, if I were going to sum up yesterday and today's theme, it feels to me like there's this battle between optimism on the one hand and pessimism on the other hand. There's some great news out there. There's some light at the end of the tunnel on one hand. On the other hand, we've never had interest rates bounce this quickly, inflation bounce this quickly, and yet on the other hand, we've got jobs in really good condition. So it seems to me the challenge at the moment is to determine and navigate this pessimism versus optimism. Interestingly, I was talking to Nick, who was on the very earlier panel this morning, who's just arrived back from Australia, and the experience was, wow, this place is humming and it's open. It's kind of contextual then in terms of how do we manage and balance the optimism versus pessimism. So I think we might have a slide here. Here you go. Again, you'll see some contradictory stuff on here. I'm not going to go through it all because I'm going to invite David in a moment just to have a quick chat. But the overall financial, how do you feel financially, reasonably and extremely confident, over the period is up 8% to 86%. So if you think about that, you go, like, New Zealanders are feeling pretty confident. Balance sheets are in pretty good stead. Asset prices boomed last year if you had property, stock markets were up and so on. But the question is this hubris? Is this kind of overconfidence? Are we kind of heading into this perfect storm? Is one of the questions that we are asking through this report. The counter-finding and some of the counter-pieces are around, how long could you last on your own savings if you stopped earning income? And those numbers are pretty startling at around 30%. And then the question around, where do you go to for help? If the worst happens, where would you go to for help? Do you self-insure? Do you have rainy day savings that could last you for a long time? It's kind of to family and friends. And so again, there's this kind of underlying anxiety piece that we see playing out where people are worrying about money on a daily, weekly or monthly basis around 56% of the time. that is a concern. Now, in this room, we see it and we face into it all the time, and that's kind of been the theme of the conference. But, if you walk outside of this room, which is a beautiful hotel and it costs a lot to be here, to places where consumers are doing it really, really tough, it's a completely different experience. And it's unpacking and unpicking some of those things that we've tried to tap into. So I'm going to leave you with those headlines. I commend the research to you. It's all over the FSC website. You can see the current report. You can also see previous reports. Totally commend if you want to use it in your marketing or flyers or whatever. It's totally available to do that. But as Riss said, David Bishop, and please welcome David. David has been with the FSC really and has helped build not only this event, but all of our positioning and branding and marketing. He's kind of our Coca-Cola secret formula. And we often have the debate around, will he come into the spotlight? And I'm delighted to welcome David into the spotlight for the first time on an FSC conference. So a very big welcome, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
So David, you're kind of really close to all this research because you've really written all the research. What are the most interesting insights and themes that you've seen over the last 3 years?
Yeah, I think you touched on the really key important points just at the beginning there. This idea of financial competence and financial literacy. It feels as though people are pretty bullish. They feel they know what they're pretty financially confident. They know what they're doing. We ask the questions from the range of extremely confident to not confident at all. But then, if you start then looking at financial literacy, which I think we can bring the slide up. You can see that that's actually dropping. So how do those sort of things kind of match up? It doesn't seem to make too much sense to us, really. So I think looking at the trends starts to help us reveal that there's some potential sort of other issues in there that we could start delving further into.
Because it's true, right? You look at that slide and they almost run at each other. We're feeling more confident on the one hand, but our financial literacy has gone down on the other. I mean, how do you reconcile that when you look at the data?
Yeah, because I think the sort of questions we ask in the financial literacy space is around, how do you manage risk and return? How do you diversify your portfolios? How do you do some of the perhaps more technical kind of financial stuff? And that's where the financial literacy questions go. And so there's less confidence in the more technical stuff. And I think it goes to your point, Richard, about relying on whānau and friends and family as a first port of call if people are struggling. They're not that plan or that real kind of starting to think more broadly about financial, what to do financially, how to plan better, how to actually develop that. Whereas the confidence piece seems to be, I think, a bit more about day-to-day life, budgeting and managing their day-to-day money. That's what it feels like.
Previous bit of research we did was investing on digital platforms, which has kind of been one of the huge uptakes over the COVID period. And I guess when you're playing on an Invest Now or a Hatch or a Sharesies kind of platform, you're kind of getting to know some stuff. So maybe that's playing into some of the confidence issues. Maybe it's playing into some of the understanding issues.
Yeah, sure. And if we look at that, we know that the use of those platforms is increased a lot. We know that more Kiwis are saving, which is great. It's just about the level of saving and the level of activity to help provide these kind of rainy day funds that we're seeing that people might need, and especially if we consider, I think most of the panels today and yesterday around the economics of that we're currently in, there's going to be a lot of tension there. There's going to be people that potentially might end up out of work or not have an income, and at that point we've got people that said they can't last for more than a month. On that, and I think that was the figure here is about 30%. If we asked a few more questions this year to try and delve into this kind of perception versus reality piece, and one of the other big ones, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is that we asked the question: if you needed $5,000 within a week, could you find that? And 50% of people said no. So this is about this level, and I think the economic uncertainty with the level of savings and this kind of ability to plan or not really planning other than relying on family and friends is causing this kind of perfect storm.
And it's kind of the jobs, a lot of the data coming out over the last 3 years is if you have a job and you feel confident about your employment outlook, earning your income kind of underpins a lot of your sense of confidence and outlook for the future. And we obviously heard yesterday about the role of the Reserve Bank on the Chief Economist's panel about needing to perhaps drive up unemployment in order to cool the economy down. I mean, is any of that stuff kind of playing through any of the data?
Yeah, I mean, job security is really important. It's one of the indicators we ask about, and people feel very secure in their jobs, pretty much unsurprisingly, I guess, with the tight labour market. I guess as immigration and borders open and more workers come in, there is this risk, this tension that's going to be, well, if I've only got a month's worth of, I can only survive for a month if I don't earn my salary, then that's going to be problematic for quite a chunk of New Zealanders. And I think the flip side of that, I mean, we're talking about workers. The flip side of that is the retired people in retirement. And we ask a similar question of that cohort, and they were very much. I think it was something like the figures, something like 50% of all New Zealanders in retirement have got about 5 years or less worth of savings to be able to carry on with their retirement, which is quite worrying.
Yeah, I mean, one of the sessions that ran yesterday, and we've run through the conversation, is the notion of the quiet resignation. People, and it came up in the last panel. For 3 years we've kind of been in this fright or flight state, and it's been about holding on. Well, that threat seems to have receded, and people are making life decisions about, I'm buying that camper van and I'm travelling, or all that dream I ever wanted to do, I'm now doing. How do you see some of that play out through the research?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that especially when we look at sort of generation rent, which is one of the pieces of research we did, they're the guys that are doing it really tough, and that was from January 2022 data. So we think that's probably being stretched now over more age groups and more people being affected. And as we start to go forward, we're going to actually start delving a bit further into how are these age groups, how are these different cohorts within New Zealand surviving and coping with the pressures that no doubt we're going to face over the next year or two.
A couple of last questions. What was the most surprising thing that kind of came through the research?
I think for me it's all about, it's probably not one of the surprising things, but it's one of the things that has developed since we started doing the Financial Resilience Index with the FSC Research Committee. It's around this idea that this direct link between well-being and finances, and I think as we've gone forward over the last 2 years, we've been able to produce the conference, which is all about growing financial confidence and well-being. This connection between one's well-being and our finances is just so stark, and I think we're just learning more and more and more all the time about that. Because
the evidence-led approach, I mean, if we want to, as we've spoken, if we want to change how New Zealanders think about money, about well-being, we kind of need a strong body of evidence, don't we? Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more we can delve into that, and the more we can find out more about how people really are reacting as opposed to perceptions, which is what we started doing with these extra questions that we're putting in this year, I think that will help bring it to the fore. And we're also talking the FSC because we also collect data from our members, which is not 2,000 New Zealanders. This is total data, real-time, real-life data. Well, what's the sense about how we marry the themes coming out of our insight pieces versus the actual experience? Yeah, I think been saying cohort a lot today. I think that's what we kind of want to get to. So this idea that we can start mapping a little bit more, combining the research from the Money and You and the Fry series with our data from the industry, and started saying, hey, okay, what sort of hotspots, what cohort, how's the South Island differ from the North Island? How are Maori differing from Pakeha? And trying to work out some of the differences so that we can better approach and better communicate and better deliver this support and messaging that we all need to give as an industry. And where to from here, David? What's on the pipeline for next year? So next year, definitely, we'll be doing the Financial Resilience Index again. We'll be thinking carefully with the research committee to sort of work out where we want to delve more into. And as we start bringing together the research data with the industry data, I think next year, hopefully, we'll be able to, or the next couple of years, we'll be able to start seeing some of the hotspots around the country and where we can go next. Awesome. And a huge thank you, folks, to Trustees Executors, who've been our research partner, to Core Data, who've helped us with the engine room, and of course the research committee, many of whom are in the room today, help us think about it, plan it, execute it, and so it's a really colossal team effort. And David, for your first time in the spotlight, a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.